And one of the greatest Cold Warriors was this man, Air Force Colonel Edward Lansdale, an early master of the art of psychological warfare. Lansdale, according to some sources, was the inspiration for the character Alden Pyle in the British novelist Graham Greene's The Quiet American. And like many men who went into the intelligence world, he'd been a former advertising man. And his years in the advertising game served Lansdale extremely well in the intelligence world. Here he coupled his understanding of the power of perception and presentation with a firm conviction that America's well-being required dominance of the third world, a goal that was to be achieved by winning over the hearts and minds, and that's a term that he actually coined, of the population and creating a state of economic dependency on the US. Having fought in the Philippines in the Second World War, in the early 50s, Lansdale was recruited by the CIA to assist the Philippine defense minister in his battle against the local communist guerrilla insurgents known as the Huks. And it seems likely that Lansdale had been reading Rand's paper on psychological warfare and superstition, for as part of the campaign, he set up the Filipino Civil Affairs Office as a base for psychological warfare operations. And like market researchers at an advertising agency, Lansdale's team tried to get inside the minds of the local communities to find out how they lived, what they most hoped for, and, of course, what they most feared. And one seance was taken straight out of the Rand paper and involved flying a small plane over Huk territory, hidden by thick cloud cover. And there were megaphones attached to the aircraft broadcasting in the Philippine language a voice of God, which warned villagers who sheltered or fed insurgents that they would be cursed. Another operation exploited rural superstitions surrounding this critter, the aswang, a vampire from Philippine mythology, and this is a genuine aswang photograph. Lansdale's team seeded rumors that an aswang lived in a region occupied by the guerrillas. Word of the blood-sucking menace soon spread and amongst the guerrillas and their supporters until one day their worst fears were confirmed. A guerrilla was found dead with punch marks on his throat and the blood drained from his body. Rather than being a victim of the aswang, however, the unlucky Huk had been ambushed by Lansdale's team, killed and hung from a tree until he was drained of blood, then laid out to be discovered by his colleagues. To the other Huk, this confirmed their fears about the aswang stories, and they fled the area in terror, and this was, of course, a great success for Lansdale and his team. And by 1953, the attempted communist insurgency had been successfully quashed. And after this, Lansdale was one of the first American operatives to enter Vietnam, paving the way for the American incursion there. And following that, played a key role in Operation Mongoose, which made 8 unsuccessful attempts on Fidel Castro's life. And hopefully there's some audio here. Local superstitions were also exploited during the Vietnam War, where the Army's 6th Psyops Battalion regularly broadcast this recording called The Wandering Soul through speakers mounted on backpacks or helicopters. You can see here the two actors recording the track, and one of the helicopters of the sort that would beam the sounds down into the jungle. And The Wandering Soul preyed on Vietnamese traditions of the unquiet dead, containing a conversation between a little girl and the wandering soul of her dead father who'd been killed by fighting the Americans, and made heavy use of eerie reverb effects that you can hear, and traditional Vietnamese funeral music. It was so effective that it would both spook out American soldiers who were in the jungle at night, and as a kind of secondary effect, it was discovered that any American soldier wearing a backpack broadcasting a sound would immediately draw fire from the Vietnamese guerrillas, which was actually quite helpful for people if you weren't being shot at. Okay. More recently, in the early 1970s in Northern Ireland, Black Ops specialists for the British Information Policy Unit during the height of the Troubles deployed the tropes and ideas of black magic to strike fear into the region. And this was at a time when the Troubles were really at their peak, and civil war between Northern Ireland and the mainland was considered a real possibility. And one Captain Colin Wallace, a mysterious figure who would later be framed by his own intelligence organization for a murder he didn't commit, recalled how, inspired by the success of films like The Devil Rides Out and The Exorcist and other supernatural fictions, his teams attempted to generate a satanic panic in some of Belfast's most dangerous no-go areas. So they'd leave out black candles, animal sacrifices, occult symbols, magical daggers, and inverted crucifixes inside derelict buildings, circulating rumors like this one to the press that some of the gruesome murders being committed by the paramilitaries were occult in origin. And I wonder if this relates to Chris O'Brien's discoveries about occult symbols left at cattle mutilation sites. And the hope was that by associating the paramilitaries with devil worship in the minds of the generally very religious Irish citizens on both sides of the divide, the paramilitaries would be discredited and even blamed for stirring up dark forces of the sort that traditionally cannot be controlled. And Wallace admits that there was no clearly defined policy to the information unit's actions. In other words, they were making it up as they went along. But, he says, Ireland was very superstitious, and all we had to do was bring those superstitions up to date. And this manufactured hysteria had a handy secondary purpose, helping to keep children in at night and away from buildings being used by the authorities for surveillance or as safe houses. Other contemporary rumours in Northern Ireland involved roadblocks manned by phantom soldiers and a mysterious black man who terrified the Ardoyne region, coincidentally at the same time that the British Parachute Regiment were operating in the area. So, Lansdale's Aswang, the Wandering Soul of Vietnam, and the Black Man of Ardoyne are just three of the numerous psychological deception operations carried out during the hot years of the Cold War. And I would argue that the fast-evolving UFO law was another one.